So, welcome. For those folks who are new, we start with our traditional opening prayers that set our intention, and then I'll give a Dharma talk on the current points of the mind training that we're exploring. It's been ongoing teaching for nearly a year, and then there'll be time for some discussion and meditation. So I'll bring up these opening prayers again later in the Dharma talk. So really don't just recite them, contemplate them as you're reciting. That's one of the reasons we recite them 3 times. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. All sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they have happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the most perfect and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. As earth and the other elements, together with space, eternally provide sustenance in many ways for the countless sentient beings, so may I become sustenance in every way for sentient beings to the limits of space until all have attained nirvana. As the Sugatas of old gave birth to the bodhicitta and progressively established themselves in the training of a bodhisattva, so I too, for the benefit of beings, shall give birth to that bodhicitta and progressively train myself in that discipline. At this moment, my life has become fruitful. I have realized my human life. Today I am born into the family of the Buddhas. Now I'm a child of the Buddhas. From now on, I will forthrightly perform the actions befitting my family. I will act so as not to degrade the faultlessness and discipline of my family. Just as with a blind man finding a jewel in a heap of dust, thus somehow bodhicitta has been born in me. This is the supreme Amrita which destroys death, the inexhaustible treasure which removes the world's poverty. It is the supreme medicine which cures the world's sickness, the tree which provides rest for beings weary of wandering on the paths of existence. It is the universal bridge on which all travelers may pass over the lower realms, the rising moon of mind which dispels the torment of the kleshas. It is the great sun which puts an end to the obscurity of ignorance, the pure butter which comes of churning the milk of the holy Dharma. For travelers wandering the paths of existence, seeking happiness from objects of enjoyment, it is supreme bliss near at hand, the great feast which satisfies sentient beings. Today, witnessed by all the protectors, I have welcomed the sentient beings and Sugatas. Devas and Asuras rejoice. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So welcome to everyone on this gorgeous, sunny August day. Those of us in Maine can see the hints of winter coming, so we're appreciating every single day that is still sunny and warm. So we are in point 6, disciplines of the mind training, or commitments of the mind training. And I think it's really wonderful to look at these this morning immediately after doing those beautiful exercises with Carol. I'm going to put this group into the chat room. And 2 are slogans, and you might say that 2 are adages that are often repeated in the training of the slogans. So they are significant because they invite us to be mindful of our intention, and as we're transparent, to really keep checking, are we conflating our practice with confusion? Are we using our practice to strengthen our ego clinging or self-absorption, or are we really following the intention that we hope to follow? So the slogans are many don'ts coming up. Abandon poisonous food, and don't turn gods into demons. And these are often taught together because they're similar aspects. And then in one of the training manuals, there is another very similar one. Don't abuse this practice as a right. And then the adage that often is quoted, don't use Dharma as a weapon. So all of these are really aspects of being confused. We're Dharma practitioners, but we have holdovers of our childlike understanding of what it means to want to be released from suffering, for instance. So if we think of the story of Lord Jigten Sungkun, he was deathly ill. He was preparing to die. His body was in pain, and he went into a meditation practice, not so that all the suffering would be removed and he would feel good again. His heart opened within the meditation practice to the suffering of all sentient beings. His mind vastly went into fearless love and compassion, and that was the moment of liberation. So these 4 slogans are asking us in different ways, are we using our practice to fearlessly open up, or are we using our practice to grab onto some last kind of security in our misunderstanding or partial understanding, or conflating our early understanding of spirituality, which might have been praying to a deity who could remove suffering from us. So if we think about very simply, what are we trying to learn in the Dharma? We can go back to the 4 Noble Truths. There are so many different kinds of suffering in samsara. We can see suffering in our own bodies as we age. We can see suffering in our families. We can see suffering in the world. And so then, what really is the cause of suffering? If we look at the suffering in our bodies, yes, there is physical pain, but there's also all of the thoughts that turn that pain into suffering. And the thoughts might be, why is this happening to me? Why can't the doctors fix it? Where's the magic pill that's going to make my whole body totally painless? All of those different kinds of, how can I use this practice to fix my personal suffering? And we see that with that mental state, we just expand and concretize our suffering mind into just essentially all about me. And then the third noble truth is, all right, then what is the cessation of suffering? The cessation of suffering is seeing our interdependence, seeing that this over-connection with our personal experience and our continual reflection and absorption in our personal experience is like closing doors and keeping us trapped. Whereas when we open and use our own understanding of samsara and our physical condition, mental condition, and samsara to reach out to all sentient beings to the best of our ability, then no matter what's going on in our personal situation, our minds can maintain an open, loving, fearless state. And then the circumstances haven't changed, but our experience of the circumstances starts to change. And that becomes the path, using that change in our mental state to begin to have a kind of equanimity. So it moves from all about me to an equanimity to the suffering world. And then, as we were reciting the four immeasurables, a sense of equanimity may all sentient beings, and remembering that includes oneself, have happiness and the causes of happiness. But even as we recite that, we can feel our hearts soften. May I and all sentient beings have happiness. May I and all sentient beings be free from suffering. And if we remember the first prayer that we started with, as much as we're including I, we're including those people who hate me, those people who want to harm me. May we all have happiness and the causes of happiness. May we be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And in this way, we're using every circumstance in our life to become bigger. Our mind becomes bigger, our mind becomes more open, and our mind becomes more fearless instead of fearful. So, in essence, these two slogans and two adages are asking us, are we trying to use our meditation practice as a security pill? Or are we using our meditation practice to take off our armor and open our hearts and minds? And I'd like to read a quote from Pema Chodron. The advice we usually get is to sweeten it up, smooth it over, take a pill, or distract ourselves, but by all means make it, meaning suffering, go away. We don't need that kind of encouragement because disassociating from fear is what we do naturally. We habitually spin off and freak out when even there's the merest hint of fear. We feel it coming and we check out. So, are we using our meditation practice to check out or be more present? So the first slogan, abandon poisonous food. And this is really very interesting just in terms of how do we hear the Dharma when it's presented? Do we hear it in a way that makes us feel like we are wrong, bad, can't do it, imperfect? That actually is mixing the medicine, the Dharma, with a kind of poisonous food, instead of, oh, I'm hearing this and I see there's another potential to open up. How can I learn more so I can open up more? And I know as Westerners, our particular culture, we often have the framework of I'm hearing this instruction in a way of I've always done this in a wrong way, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. No, it's an instruction to see how can I be braver to be more transparent so that I see when in the middle of a practice my ego wants to take over. So we were just doing this gorgeous practice with Carol, resting in the energy of the universe and bringing the energy into our bodies. And if we can do it with this kind of transparency, well, if I'm doing this practice, maybe I'll never get sick. If I'm doing this practice, maybe this part of my body will heal faster. We see how quickly our ego wants to trap our mind into a very narrow perspective. Now, it doesn't mean that that doesn't happen. What we're seeing is the tricky ego trying to interrupt the openness of our heart mind and close it down. So that's what we're looking for. Anytime when we're involved in our Dharma activities or virtuous activities, and our little sneaking thoughts come up in a way that we see that it's, oh, this is, maybe I'm going to have a better next life if I do this. There's oh, that security, that wish for security coming up again, instead of opening fearlessly into impermanence and interdependence. And so the adage that we might look at the same time, don't abuse this practice as a right. So if I use this practice, can I make myself feel better? Can I ward off illness for me alone? Can I fix my personal suffering? Or sometimes they're wonderful Zambala practices that are for, great abundance in the materials that are needed to have a dharmic life and create a dharmic world. But if we do those practices for personal wealth, for instance, then that is abusing a practice, misunderstanding a practice, that we're gathering spiritual resources and health and long life in order to greatly benefit beings with our life, with our health, with our energy. And then slogan 37, don't turn gods into demons, or don't reduce a god to a demon, is the sense of, and you may observe this in yourself, sometimes we observe it faster in others, where there's a quality of arrogance or conceit that enters into a practice. Oh, I've studied with this many lamas. I'm, I can see that, my mind is getting better and better, and, I'm really practicing better than everybody else in the Sangha. And anything that increases arrogance or conceit is taking something that was meant to see our interconnection so completely that we have absolute humility. We see that our Buddha nature is the same as every other being's, and we see ourselves as Shantideva would say, as the servant of helping all sentient beings realize their own potential. And relative to this is the adage, don't use Dharma as a weapon. And this is where you can see how easily groups get into a pattern that can be not so healthy. So whenever we try and force someone else to do what we want them to do by using the Dharma, if you were a good bodhisattva, you would do it this way, or, you're not practicing correctly unless you're thinking about it the way I think about it, or, unless you give your entire bank account away, you're not being loyal to the great guru. You can see how Dharma bullies come into being by taking something that's a pure medicine meant to open up into fearless impermanence and interdependence, into, making the Dharma a cudgel to make things go the way you want them to go. So this group of four are really, really quite helpful to see subtle ways we start to use what is this extraordinary medicine to want to make what is impermanent, like our bodies, permanent. We will all experience ill health. There are those beautiful quotes from Shakyamuni Buddha, I am of the nature to have ill health. I am of the nature to die. This is the nature of having a body. And so, if we are practicing to fix a body that is of the nature to have ill health, we are making this perfect medicine slightly mixed with confusion, slightly mixed with, as the slogan says, a poison. If we start to become arrogant due to our practice, I've been practicing 40 years, I've met all these great lamas, I know the Dharma slightly better than you do, then the Dharma is being used, something that had the capacity of greatly opening the minds of oneself and all the people we're interacting with, then becomes something that's hurtful. It becomes a demon instead of a god. So it's really interesting to think about when we ask for prayers, when we want prayers for our family, when we want prayers for ourselves, when we want prayers at the time of our death. From the perspective of the Dharma, what are we actually asking for? Are we asking to be released from an actual painful moment, or are we asking for the release of liberation? And we want to find a way to understand more and more clearly what the release of liberation is for ourselves and for our loved ones and for our enemies. And at the time of death, we are not trying to go to heaven. We are asking for the release into the nature of mind, or into a next life where we have the resources to understand the nature of mind so that we can then benefit others more extensively, more completely, because we have a more complete understanding. So I'm going to invite just reflection now, because it's very easy to see. It's very easy for me to see, oh, I can get really confused about this pretty easily. When I have an operation coming up, and I, say to someone, oh, ask someone to pray for me, or ask the Sangha to pray for me. What am I really asking for? Am I asking for the capacity to be like Lord Jigten Sungön and open my heart and mind completely through this moment in order to see a vast bodhicitta through the interdependence and interconnection with all sentient beings? Or am I just closed in? Please fix this part now. So let's really sit and think about how we understand really what we mean when we're thinking of moving through life, what this means to us. Are we always connecting to liberation, or are we thinking more smallly about some sort of security? So let's give this a good 5 or 10 minutes before we start discussion.